Hi there everyone, welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. This is my Kenmore 158.1931. This of course is the sewing machine that has extra deluxe features. You can use decorative cams along with the built-in utility stitch cams. But the reason for this video is to mention to you if you like to restore machines or you're thinking about buying a vintage sewing machine, maybe you're questioning, hey, why don't I just get one at a yard sale or on a bidding site or, you know, one of the online places where people sell these things. Maybe somebody's willing to give you a machine and you think, well, I can just get it and, you know, not clean the dust off and squirt a little bit of oil in it and get to sewing. You might get lucky, but there's a high chance that you will not. Now, I've mentioned to you all that every machine that I get a hold of, I go through the whole machine. If the machine looks gorgeous on the outside and not any dust, that pink necky was, almost, showroom perfect. Whether it's a machine like that or whether it is a machine that has, maybe you've come across an old machine and it's dusty or dirty or doesn't, you're thinking, oh, well, that one would need more attention. Every machine I touch, I go through the whole machine, and there are reasons for this. Because when the new owner has it, I basically want them to be able to sew. And I have taken this is the tray. I've already shown you guys how to remove the tray. I've taken the tray off of this model. Unlike the 1941, this particular tray has a little notch right here. So, and I think I've demonstrated that before in videos. You always want to push down and then pull out. That notch helps hold the tray on along with the screws. But that's not why we are here today. Because why should you pay someone to overhaul a vintage machine, or why would you do that yourself before going ahead and using it as a sewing machine? Well, I do this and very often, almost always, I don't see any problems. However, you always want to inspect, as I mentioned in I think the last video, I talk about all the different areas, right? The top of the machine, the side of the machine, this side of the machine, and underneath. And today I want to illustrate to you why this matters and why people pay people to overhaul vintage sewing machines, to totally go through them. I don't mean tuning, I mean a full overhaul restoration. And this is the reason. Remember, I mentioned to you that the belts, right, for sewing machines are one of the wear items that you sometimes need to replace. Sometimes they're fine. And I really can never know rhyme or reason why some machines, their belts are in fantastic shape. This one, if you look, I started, just moving the hand wheel and things actually look pretty good down here. Well, if I zoom in, you're going to see why this matters. If you look, as I turn, you're going to see as the belt comes around, on the lower belt, the bottom, the outer surface is smooth. It is cogged or lugged on the inner part, which just gives it more grip, which is fine. But notice these cracks here. These cracks are not part of a normal belt. The cracks represent dry rotting of the belt. That does not mean that this machine was used more. In fact, the machine, I can't tell, if it was used any more than any other vintage machine. But this particular belt is cracked on the outer edge. Does it work? Yes. Will it probably sew up a storm? But it has a very, I'm going to just guess, it has a shorter lifespan than if it were without the cracks. And for that reason, I'm going to replace this belt. I don't want to offer the machine with a belt like this, even though it's running, right? I just don't want. I really prefer to get a new belt on there. So how do you do that when you have a machine that is, let's zoom back out. When you have a machine that has all of these vintage machines have a lot of weight, which is one of the things I love about them. Remember, I have mentioned to you that Sears had the Japanese manufacturer Marusan essentially copy one of the great features of the Bernina machines. It has two belts. There's a belt that connects the hand wheel, and it's interesting, this belt is in fantastic shape. The upper one is. Normally, if you have a machine with two belts, like a Bernina, the Bernina and the Kenmore from this era, later machines in the 80s, a lot of them would adopt this. But normally, if you have two belts, they're the same age and they're in the same condition. But in this case, that's not true. This belt up here, the top one, very likely was replaced because there's not a single crack in it. I have inspected both sides and this side, and the facing side, and I see not a single crack. So it's in great shape. This belt, this is the one I just showed you with the cracks, so we're going to replace it. I could replace both, but it's a waste because this belt is much newer than this one. I don't know why. It could be someone took it and said, oh, you need a new belt. Okay, well, and they just told them to replace one, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this is the new one, and this is the belt that is going to need replacing. So the question is, how do you replace a belt? Most vintage machines, well, you take the hand wheel off, there's a bracket you can loosen, you take the belt off, you put the new one on, and you're in business. This one is not hard if you know where to adjust it. Now, the pulley that connects the good belt to the belt that needs to be replaced is right here in front of us, and it has its own bracket, just like the motor below does as well. And these brackets have slots, and those slots are designed so that when you loosen the screws, this bracket can move. You don't have to take the bracket all the way off. I mean, you could, but there's no reason to. Because if you, more dust bunnies, if you look, you will see that there is a slot, right? And you can adjust this. And that's how you adjust the tension on the machine. But in this case, we need to loosen this bracket. And when I do, that's going to allow me to move this bracket up. That will allow some slack on the upper belt. The upper belt will come off temporarily because, of course, the lower belt's on the other side of this belt. So in order to get it off, I can try taking it off on the back, but again, I've got to get it. I've got to get the belt out and get the new one in. And so, what are we going to do? How do you fix this? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is loosen this bracket. And again, the bracket you can see, and I've taken photos. When you get ready to do this, take a photograph of each one of these holes or each one of these screws, and that way you'll know where they were set for the tension, right? You can manually eyeball it later, but you can just take a picture and just put it back to where it was, right? That's probably one of the simplest ways to go about it. Now, as I'm unscrewing this, notice I'm not going to take it all the way out. I'm going to do the same with this one. Probably haven't been moved. Well, actually, it had to have been moved before because this upper belt is not, or I don't believe it's original. Now, this bracket, and if your bracket is seated, you might want to tap it a little bit. Now, notice what I'm doing. See the angle here? The bracket on this right side is actually, the slot is angled, and that's for a reason, so that you can actually tilt it. You can tilt it up and get enough slack on the, well, in theory, we're going to see if this works. We'll have, I think I did a video on this, because I've replaced this before. I've replaced one of these belts before. And it just takes a little more time than a traditional, say, straight stitcher machine would. And the idea behind this is to get enough slack here on where the pulley is, because the pulley is attached to the bracket, and that's going to hopefully allow us. Let's see if I can actually. There we go. I can actually push up, and now you can see. I think you can see. See there's a gap, more of a gap here. I've actually moved the bracket so that I can pull off the lower belt if I've got enough slack here. So now I can see, if you notice, there's some slack movement on the pulley. I've already moved the bracket. If I push up on the pulley, notice it loosens the upper belt because there's a tension there. And it's a good thing I have this head-bound flashlight, because it's really taking quite a few fingers here to do this. And you can see I'm pushing. You want to push up on the pulley. And as I do, make sure my bracket doesn't move too terribly. I'm going to push up on this, and I'm going to see if I have enough slack to get the upper belt off. If not, I'm going to have to loosen more with my screwdriver. And again, you're not going to hurt anything if you do this. You just want to be able to move this with as much ease as possible. Right? So I'm moving to this direction. Just see how it goes when I move the bracket. See if I can actually change our angle for you guys. I'm doing this as I'm filming it, so forgive me if it's not a perfect. There we go. Now I'm going to see how much slack I can get on this pulley, because what I'm trying to do is get that upper belt off the pulley without taking the bracket off. I can if I need to. The bracket will come off, but it would be nice if I didn't have to. All right, now I've got two hands here. I've got the tension now. I just need another hand to help get this belt off. Well, not quite enough. Okay, so we'll try again. And if it won't move enough, I'll just take the bracket off. But I thought it would be nice to see if I could do it with the bracket on. And it could be that back in the day, the Sears repair centers, and yes, they had their own repair centers. Shocking. I know. They had their own repair centers, and they would have, who knows, maybe they had special tools that they use. I really don't know. Because they would have serviced their own machines. Sears was something back in the day. All right, so it is wanting to fuss and not fuss. It just doesn't. I can't get enough slack on there, and so I am going to. I think I'm going to take this screw off. I won't take this one off yet. I'll take this one off and see if I can get more movement with this bracket, using my magnetized piece here. So no, not loose enough yet. Now another thing I can do is I can take and try to temporarily magnetize my screwdriver bit, because what I want to do is I have this open, and this screw is probably just going to simply fall down on top of the table surface. But whenever you have screws and you're loosening them, pay very close attention to where that screw is going to go, because sometimes you have proprietary screws, and it would be really nice not to have to go and find one and replace it. Now, getting this screw out, it's fairly long, because again, it's holding a bracket under tension. Now, see if that gave me enough. I don't know. Now it looks like I'm going to need more slack here. It's kind of like watching paint dry, isn't it? Exciting stuff for you all. But I've had people ask me before about this. So okay, so I took that screw out. Do not confuse this. It might be the same size as the screws that took the tray off, but they look alike. But I'm going to set it in a different place just in case, because I don't remember, to be honest. So we'll put it right over here. Okay, now what have we got? Haha, look at that. Now we've got enough slack. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the upper belt. Make sure your hands don't have oil on them. You don't want oil on the belts. It's not good for the belt, and you will lose the friction, which is the whole point of rubber belts. You get that friction so the power can move. Okay. There we go. There's our upper belt. It's off. And it can just sit there. We can just leave it hanging on the hand wheel. We don't need to do anything else with it at the moment. And now we have our pulley. You say, oh, what happened to the pulley? It's fine. I've just loosened the bracket. And I don't have to take this other one off. You can. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't really have to. What was the goal? The goal, now, Normally, you can loosen the bracket. There's a bracket that attaches the motor to the chassis of the machine, and I'll show that in a minute. You can loosen that, and that's normally what you do loosen when you're taking off a machine that has one motor belt. But in this situation, and if this lower belt had been on the outside of this pulley, I would have done that with the motor bracket and not had to touch the pulley. But of course, the upper belt was on the outer wheel of the pulley, so I had to get it off anyway. So we can just loosen our belt here. You can loosen it. In this case, we shouldn't have to loosen anything below. So I'm going to turn the machine over so we can now see what it looks like now that I've gotten it loose. And that little sound was just the pulley moving. Now you can see I have the old belt, and you can either pull it up from above or below. I'll pull it out from below. It'll come right through, and there we go. Some people ask, how do I know what size the belt is? There are websites that sell belts, and they will have, you put in the model number, they should be accurate, quote unquote should be, but if you're unsure, it's a very easy process. You simply take your old belt, and if you know you're not going to use it, you can cut it. Just cut it with some scissors or bullnose pliers or something, and lay it out and measure it, and that's your measurement for your belt. Or you can take it and you can literally just, take a Sharpie marker and then simply roll it. you mark the belt and you roll it. Anyway, belts are not hard to measure. So I'm going to see if I have one this size, and if I do, we'll be in business. If not, I'll have to go and get one either at my local sewing store or get one ordered online. Belts are cheap. You don't have to get it from Sears. It doesn't have to be Kenmore. It just needs to have these lugs, right? Well, technically, you could probably get away with not even using lugs, but I like using the lug belts. They're very common, and they either come in black or orange, and it can have lugs on both sides like the upper belt, but at a minimum, you need the lugs on the inner surface, because that's what's going to be rolling with your pulley, or giving you the friction on your pulley. Now, but if you don't have a lug belt, you can use one that is V-shaped, and it will also work. Now, I mentioned to you all, remember I said there's a bracket for the motor, just like there is on virtually every sewing machine, and it's right here. And if I try to move my flashlight for you, what you might see, if I can get the angle right here. So, right next to this bolt, to the right of the bolt, okay, to the right of it is a huge, I say huge, but almost a half an inch, 3/8 of an inch of slot room. So if I needed to loosen this bolt, what would I do? I could either, I can move it up some. It doesn't have much play on this side. Over here, it's fairly far down. The point is, you can adjust the position of the motor without taking the motor off. And if you did, it's no big deal. It's just a bracket and a bolt, and it attaches to the chassis. But in our situation, we did it with the pulley, so there's no need. So that's how you take off a belt, and if we needed to, we could easily remove the upper belt over here around the hand wheel, because it'll come right out, but we don't need to in this case. And so in the next video, I'll show you how we put the new belt on. And again, the main purpose of this was not just to demonstrate how, but why full overhauls matter on vintage sewing machines. Belts are not expensive, but if you buy a machine from someone and they said, oh, it sews great, and you get it home and you start a project, and right in the middle of your project, it stops because the belt broke. It's not the end of the world. You can get a new belt, but it's inconvenient because now you either have to take it in or change it yourself. So if you want to change one yourself, this is very easy to do. I've just shown you it's not hard at all. And then putting it back and getting the right position and tension, we'll talk about that in the next video. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.